And now,
ladies and gentlemen,
please fasten your seatbelts.
Welcome to PreneurCast.
Yeah, business cards being swapped, beers being drunk.
Can I say a nasty word? Can I say procrastination?
With Pete Williams and Dom Gosher.
How well did that go down?
We can talk about that entire thing in a very another rant and soapbox episode if we want to.
Visit us online at PreneurMedia.tv.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's PreneurCast, and some of you will be glad to know, but some of you will be sad to know it's just me this week. Pete is on his honeymoon. Congratulations to Pete. He's out and about in some other exotic location and has left me to man the store. So this week, rather than just listen to me wobble on, I've brought somebody in to have a chat with, and I'll get to that in a minute. So the intro is going to be pretty brief because Pete won't be able to liken me to Barbie dolls and other fictional characters. Just want to draw your attention, as always, to our sponsors for this week. Our first sponsor is Read It For Me, the book preview service. Hopefully by now most of you have tried this out, but if you haven't, please do go to readit4.me/PreneurCast and just watch the video there that Pete and I made about the inside of their membership area. It's a great demonstration of the fantastic multimedia previews that they do for business and personal development books. It's not just a preview service, though. We also use it to review books that we might have read in the various formats that we consume stuff, because their summaries are awesome, great reminders and great ways to help you remember the core pieces of content from each of those books. So pop over to readit4.me/PreneurCast, and if you sign up for their trial, you'll get an ongoing discount as a PreneurCast listener. So just a little bit of giving back to the audience there. So as I said, this week it's me on my own, and I've brought somebody in to have a chat. Now, I've not brought in a luminary from the internet marketing world, and I've not brought in, well, anybody that you've heard of, I don't think, because I've brought in one of our PreneurCast listeners. It's a guy called John Davy, and John has been a listener to the show, got in contact with us, and what makes John interesting is that John's a bit of an expert on networking. Now, this is something that we really haven't talked about so far on PreneurCast. The art of, well, getting yourself out and about. I've been known to refer to it as being a shaky hand man in the past, mainly aimed at people that do it a little bit too heavy-handedly. But I'm sure we've all been on the receiving end of somebody networking, and I'm sure we've all wanted to grow our network of contacts, the people that know about us and what we can do, and the people that we know. And having a chat with John offline, I've really picked up some great tips and some great insights into this. But John's made pretty much a living of it. So I'm going to bring John on now and have a bit of a chat, and let's just see what we can bring to the PreneurCast listeners in terms of how networking can help. So, John, thanks for joining us this week.
Hello, Dom. How you doing?
I'm great, mate. I'm great. Obviously not as well as Peter, whichever exotic location he's in right now. But you've just got back from somewhere as well, haven't you?
Yeah, I've just spent a week in the very sandy spot known as Saudi Arabia.
And we'll come back to that in a bit, because that's kind of part and parcel of what you do.
Indeed.
And you got there through what you do.
Absolutely.
So if I can ask you just a little bit, like, before we get into the nitty-gritty of networking, what's your background?
Well, I guess like a lot of people, I've done an awful lot of things in my time, and from sort of school days at various different schools through to a little bit of a career with the Metropolitan Police in London. And from there, I did a little trip and went around the world for about a year and a half, and then came back, and I could have either gone back into doing the police and that sort of thing, but sort of headed off into a more sales and marketing role, and started it with a few small companies, and like a lot of people do, sort of financial services and things like that, which was a bit awkward because it was at the start of a recession, so it was a little bit like learning to drive in a Land Rover, really, and it was a bit tricky. But it was something I liked and enjoyed, and then you learn as you're going along. So I sold car rentals, and I've sold manila folders and files and all sorts of different bits and bobs. And realistically, the way I've done it all the way through has been via what we're discussing, which is sort of networking and sort of making friends with people as much as anything else. And the reality is, I suppose that's something that I've done really since I was a kid at school, and just making friends with people and that sort of stuff is what I like doing. And more recently, I've been working with a company that's been quite significantly involved in the Olympic Games in London, which is happening in a few months' time, and bringing forward a few contracts for them. And then we went through a bit of a chop and a change in sort of September last year, when I've pretty much set out on my own now, and I'm doing a number of things, but they all really revolve around networking, which is obviously how we got to start talking, Dom.
Yeah. So you kind of give a little bit of an introduction, but just so that we're all on, as our American friends would say, also we're all on the same page. What is networking, and why is it important to business?
Yeah, look, I think it literally is as simple as making friends with people. And there's a very old adage, and some of these do hold true, as you know, and the original one is people do buy off people they like. And I mean, online it's an interesting thing because I think it becomes a lot more generic, and you don't necessarily have to know people to communicate with them. But as you put the old shaky hand thing, I think that's definitely still got a place, and it does make a difference if you can look at somebody in the eye and literally shake their hand and talk to them and create that bond and relationship. It helps,
So you mentioned about online there, and I do think that and this is something I'm going to flag for the listeners. You are specifically, at the moment anyway, your history is in literally being physically around people and becoming known by them and learning about them.
Absolutely.
Which is part and parcel of networking. But there will be parts of this that I think map to the online space, and I might call that out as we go through.
Absolutely.
But can you give me an example of a specific benefit to you or to a business of this making friends, of being known to people, or you knowing people?
Well, I suppose, off the top of my head and where we are right now, and as you know, and I'll explain to your listeners, I'm associated with one or two different businesses, one of which is a carbon fibre technology, which realistically it's starting to work now, and we're doing some work on making that work on an online basis. But the origins of that come from about 3 or 4 years ago, which was literally meeting a guy called Tom Andrews as a byproduct of something completely different, and then keeping in touch. And, not a lot of pressure in terms of us needing to do things at any one time, but developing a relationship and a friendship more critically, that when the time was right, Tom introduced this idea of this wacky carbon fibre mast thing, which he thinks is going to revolutionise the telecoms industry, etc., etc. And it was quite interesting to me when I first heard about it. But I was doing the Olympic Games, so that didn't work. But we kept talking, and that's the primary thing. You talk, you chat, you just keep in the loop of what's going on. And as I say, in September, when that time came that I wanted to make a change and do something a little bit different, he was the first person I rang, and what do you know, he still had that opportunity, and it was probably a little bit better positioned than it was when we originally spoke. And that's how these things happen. It's just remembering and keeping in touch and tapping people on the shoulder all the time, on a very physical, if not verbal, communicative sense that helps you develop and helps you move these things forward.
So, how do you meet people? How do you get in touch with people? How does it all start?
Well, I guess in some ways it starts by being back at school. You've got to put your hand up. You've got to get spotted by people, and you need to put yourself in places where other people are going to be. And I suppose that in some ways you need to be a little targeted by what your, to quote the online phraseology, your niche or your piece of business is affiliated or specialises towards. And again, if I give the example of the Olympics, there was a number of things that, number one, LOCOG, the London Organising Committee for the Games, used to set up big, what they call working parties for people who were interested in being involved with that organisation, and that setup could go to and attend. And you could even speak at some of these things as well. So if you had the nerve to go up and put yourself in the line, you could go and talk to people at these events as well. And then, literally stick your hand up, ask a question. If there's people that you see who have been speaking, or people who are there that you're interested to meet, make sure you go up and shake their hand and say something to them. And that, that's actually scary to some people. It's, if I'm being absolutely honest, on occasions it's scary to me. You get into a room with you don't know anybody, well, you could leave the room in the same position, or you could wander up and just say, hello, how are you? And sometimes it works, and sometimes gloriously it doesn't. But, I guess the one thing about that is once you have shaken a hand with somebody and had 5 minutes with them, the next time you are in the same room, you know the person, and it's that little bit easier to just go up and talk to them again.
That's a very good point. Now, just pick up on a couple of things that you said there, because I'm one of those people, and this is probably going to come a little bit of a surprise to the listeners, because here I am talking to myself in a room somewhere in the back end of Spain. But basically, I'm putting myself out there and seem like some kind of media luminary. But in fact, I'm quite a shy person in public and in situations where, as you put it, a room full of people you don't know. I find it quite difficult to just wander up to random people and go, "Hey, hi, how are you doing?" I'm always stuck for something to say or an approach. Is there anything particular that you can any tips for that?
It happens to me. It happens to everybody. I don't think there's anything necessarily to be afraid of, because it can be a little bit awkward. But I think you just have to plumb in and start somewhere. I mean, literally, a hello, I'm John Davy, or I'm Dom Goucher, or I'm who I am, and this is what I do. And sometimes it works, and sometimes you can then extend off, and responses and feedback will allow you to sort of progress along a path which might diverse and go places and all kinds of different things. And other times you're going to get people who are going to stare you in the face and go, you're not very interested. And I think at that point there's an element of skin of the rhino. You don't get offended if people don't want to talk to you. It sort of doesn't matter. And to an extent, at these events you've got a fixed period of time. You've got a number of people in a room, and I'm not going to say you run around and talk to everybody, but it's just a matter of you've got to be a little bit brave. You've got to put a bit of a face on, and you've got to go up to people and just sort of say hello. And I don't think there's no great unlocking secret here. There's no great answer to that question in some ways, but I think the positive side of it is if you do actually pluck up the courage a little bit and don't get necessarily offended if people don't want to talk to you, people will.
That's a good philosophy. One thing that I actually found by accident, because in the online marketing space there are a lot of conferences. There are a lot of people doing either just general conferences or teaching conferences, and I attended a few of those in the last few years. And something that I found helped me was, as you say, put your hand up. But what I did was I noticed people who asked questions, and if those people asked what I thought was an intelligent question, and if I thought that I could add value to the answer that the person at the front had given an answer, but they've got limited time. If I thought I could add value to the person that put their hand up, then in the breaks it gave me a way to approach people.
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, I mean that really is a very easing way to do things. And the other, not that I've done it an awful lot, but I have stood up on occasions and spoken to people, and that is unbelievably brilliant, because you've got maybe 100 or a couple of hundred people in a room that, I mean, in some ways they're forced to be there, or they pay to be there, and they sit and they listen to what you say. But the fact that you've stood up on a stage, if you like, and read some kind of prepared piece to them, afterwards they'll all come up to you because they feel they know you already, and they certainly know your name, and it does ease them into feeling more comfortable to talking. But you're absolutely right. If people ask you questions, you've already seen somebody who's prepared to talk because he's asked a question. So if you go up to him and say, look, it's an interesting question you asked, blah, 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 you're moving it on. So, yeah, that's a great little technique.
So let's say we start a conversation with somebody, and this is why I've got you on, because a lot of the time on PreneurCast we talk about theoretical things, or we talk about business and growing your profits and things like that, and it's a little bit impersonal. We do talk about handling customers and dealing with customers and things like that, but it's still, to me, a little bit impersonal. And what I love about what you do is it's so personal, but it's also so scary for people like me, and I'm sure a lot of people out there. That I know a lot of people go to conferences or go to these, maybe even actually knowledgeably go to a networking event, but don't actually do anything about it. So what are the things? what's your goal? What are you trying? What do you got to remember? If you go to one of these events and you do act, obviously let's make it explicit. You've actually got to talk to people, otherwise you're not networking. But after that, what kind of things are you looking out for when you're talking to people?
Look, it could be everything and anything to an extent. I think I come back to the thing I said earlier in that you know, and I think it's the same in everything. You're going to focus. You're going to go to an event that's of interest to you. And really, listen, what do you want to do? You want to find out information. You want to find out things you don't know that you can potentially use in the progression and the promotion of your own interests and your own business. And it's a bit like trade shows or conferences. They're the same thing. You get an awful lot of like-minded people in the same room. So there's an immense amount of value in the potential conversations you can have, because, you don't know everything I do, Dom. I certainly don't know everything you do, but the chances are if we're sitting in a room, you might overhear other people talking about different things. There is an argument that you can just go around and listen at these events and listen to what other people are saying, and you can get a lot of value out of it. But like with everything else, I suppose it's the more you put in, the more you get out. And I think to an extent, I think the way I do it sometimes is I said I'm not always comfortable with these things. I get just as sort of scared as anybody else in some of these environments when you think people are playing above your field of where you are. Then it does get a little bit scary. But I don't think I've ever been to an occasion when I can't put a sort of persona on of, right, I am John Davy, but maybe I'm now John Davy at a conference or at a seminar, and I put a little bit of a shell around me that isn't going to be offended if people aren't necessarily interested in what I'm going to say, and you just get to that point of possibly in some ways playing a little bit of a numbers game and just talk to one or two people, talk to three, talk to four, pop around, shake a hand. If they don't talk to you, somebody next door. If you don't want to do it, stand and listen. You can, as I say, you can gain other things in different ways.
That's a good perspective on it. But let's say, the big thing, people have stereotypes in their mind, and the stereotype of networking is, as I jokingly said, and please don't take offence, but this shaky hand man, the guy that runs around the room, runs up to you, shakes your hand, forces a business card on you, and almost leaves you in a bewildered state. And that's not a good thing to do. That's not going to benefit you, is it? Really?
There's different ways of doing everything, and look, yes, I've experienced that and seen it on a number of occasions. They're like automaton machines. It's a bit like Terminator coming around, and you see this blur flying around with somebody, and they come up and they'll say, "Hello, how are you? Who are you?" And you tell them. By the time you said, "Who are you?" they've given you a card and they've gone. And look, I personally, I don't really see the value in that. I don't see how they can take it on board, but people do that. It's just there's all sorts of different ways that people can do things, and that is one of them, which I wouldn't necessarily adhere to myself or recommend in a lot of ways, because I think it does wind people up as well. It's a bit like spamming.
Yeah, and yeah. I think there is a correlation here about between the online world and the offline real world, as it were, and that is to me anyway. It's about adding value. You said from your point of view, what you want to get is knowledge of people out there that might be useful to your business, or information that might be useful to your business in the future. And if you think about it like this, I'm sure if you're out there looking for that, other people are out there looking for that as well. So maybe you can speak to this, but in my mind, if when, like for example, my example of going to someone who's already asked a question, if you can take yourself up to that person and add value by saying, "Hey, here's an extra piece of information about your question," or "Hey, I've got some experience in that field," or whatever. To me, that is a more positive step towards building that relationship, because that's the thing, is that you're not just after information, you really are after building a relationship with
Absolutely.
These people,
and you're showing an interest in them.
Yeah,
which is one of the best ways that you can get something in return from somebody, is to actually be interested in what they do and their physical specific interests that they have. And look, I think, as you well know with me, the online side of this is sort of a relatively recent thing, but as a networking individual, the tools that the internet provide are utterly incredible for helping you with this process. I think what I'm coming to is like putting together the tools that you have in the likes of Twitter and Facebook and all these different things, but then using them in your physical touch, handshake element to what you do. An example might be of that is if you are going to a conference and you know who the speakers are going to be, or there's an exhibitor list that you can, it's so easy nowadays to go onto Twitter and do some research and build a list of a specific number of people at a conference. So you already know them before you go. And that sort of gives you certain advantages, if you like, in terms of the fact that if there's somebody you're specifically interested in and they're tweeting about stuff, well, that sort of gives you another solution of what you just said, that you can walk up to this person and talk to them about something that they're already interested in. What kind of a head start does that give you?
That's brilliant. I mean, that was the next question I had for you. It was, if, for example, you go to a conference or an event and you know that somebody is going to be there that you're interested in talking to, how do you approach that person? Because it's one thing to... It's interesting to look at things from both sides of the coin. It's one thing to sit at the back of the room, see somebody put their hand up and ask a question, and you approach that person in the break. But you gave the example of a great thing to let people talk to you is to be the guy stood on the stage. But being the guy sat at the back of the room, looking at the guy stood on the stage, that's quite a big mountain to climb. So that's quite a few great little tips all in one go. To use the online resources that are available to us now to do some research, to find out what that person's been talking about, what they're interested in, and then that gives you that opening line. Yeah, especially if you can again add value. Yeah,
there's one other thing that's just popped in my head, so I'm going to say it, is while I was in Saudi, I was sitting in a conference over there, and I was a bit bored because nothing was going on, and I got on my apps thing and found this thing. I don't know if you've heard about it, but it's called Sonar, and it basically links into everybody who's on a Twitter account and stuff that's in the room and comes up with all their details. So what I said before about you can research them on Twitter, well, you can do that when you're sitting in the room because it just beacons in everybody is around you who's registered on Facebook or Twitter or whatever, and it tells you all about them. I'll just chuck that in there.
Wow, that's pretty scary. But an example of the power of technology, and just very often it is just that one little thing that can break the ice, that can give you an introduction, an opening line.
Anything that can give you an advantage, really, isn't it?
Yeah, anything that can get you over that initial fear. So let's just break out of these very specific examples for a second about how you do it.
Sure.
And let's get back to why. Can you give us an example of how you knowing one person and then meeting another person, let's say, has allowed you to build and kind of grow your network? Have you got and if it happened to just include the very exotic location of Saudi Arabia, then that would be a great example.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that all originated, if you like, out of one phone call that came in, and I've got no idea who gave him the number and why, but I was sitting outside a pub in Tetbury called the Snooty Fox, and this phone goes off, and there's a guy on the end of the phone called Joe Otiek, who I'd never spoken to before in my life, and he just wanted to chat, and he was talking about an event called the Race of Champions, which you may have heard, but I'll just brief explanation. They build a motorsport circuit in a stadium, and in the case that I was involved in, we did it in Wembley Stadium in London. And the likes of Michael Schumacher come and race around, and they end up with a champion at the night, and it's a very popular event. And this guy was in Saudi, and he worked for Red Bull, and he also was moved on to a company called Seller Sport over there. And they wanted to look at staging the event over there, and apparently I was the expert at doing it. So we had a chat, and the next thing that happens is I always tend to sort of, when you finish a conversation, probably one of the most important things to do is follow up on it and do something and quote one of your phrases, do an action point on it. And in this case, I did what everybody did and Googled up the company he was working with, and the first thing I found was that they sponsored the Saudi national team for some inordinate amount of money. So he sort of definitely had my attention at that point. And look, I did my best to cultivate him, give him the information that he needed to help him make a decision, and invited him to come and see a trade show that we were doing over in the UK, which he did. And we had a couple of days together then. So you develop the relationship, and we got on. We were sort of at least acquainted, if not sort of getting near to being not necessarily friends, but we were certainly well acquainted. And at the end of that 2-day period, and this is about 3 or 4 years ago, we just had a conversation about, well, look, you're here, I'm there, and we need something on occasions, and you need something on occasions. Why don't we act as our eyes and ears for each other in our relative countries? And from that little acorn has sprung this business, which I now have, and I'm going to say International Facilities and Sourcing, which is literally about facilitating and sourcing products for people in different places. And it relies entirely on networks of people. So, for example, Joe might ring me up and say, well, I'll give you the example. The first bit of business we did, he wanted a 1989 Lamborghini clutch for a Lamborghini 89 Countach. And he said, can you find us one? And I did. And we sold it for I don't know, $6,500 US. So that was sale number one of my business, was a Lamborghini second-hand clutch going to Saudi Arabia. And that came out of one phone call outside a pub, and then tapping on the shoulder, keeping in touch, giving the information that people need. Not asking anything particularly of them, but waiting for that opportunity to actually act on something and do something that can generate a bit of business for you. That business last year, by the way, just to let you know, turned over about $500,000.
And all based upon networking.
Yeah, exactly that. From my back room, from my office, which is my bedroom.
What a great example. And that's exactly, I mean, that I'm aware of that and many other examples. You and I have talked about this offline. And that's really why I've got you on the call, because you really are the embodiment of the power of networking. So to kind of just bring this back together into one place, really, networking is about, first of all, meeting people in one way or another, and letting those people know what you can do, what is your core competency, or what your business is about, what you're good at, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And finding out about them, and then maintaining the relationship, maintaining contact with them, so that over time, if you're aware of something that's of interest or benefit to them and their business, you can basically give them a referral. And if they're aware of something that's relevant to you, you'll get one back. It's a mutual thing, yeah?
Exactly that, yes.
So picking that apart, we've talked about meeting people. We've talked about why you might want to do it. What about staying in contact? What kind of things do you do to stay in contact with people?
Well, that's where, to an extent, the social media stuff comes in, and I'm sort of old enough in the tooth to remember when it was a notebook and a file of facts and that kind of stuff. And obviously, we've changed substantially since then. Look, you can keep in contact with people all over the world very, very easily, and to me, that is exactly where the internet comes into play. But also the other thing is verbal and physical communication. I tend to be one of those people that even in my social life, I'm the bloke that always rings up and says, "Look, do you want to go out and have a beer?" Whereas I'm sure there's a load of people that would sit in a little cocoon in places and never ever go out unless somebody actually rang them up and asked them. And I mean, it seems like most of my mates are like that, to be absolutely honest. But I'm the bloke that will always ring up, and I'll do that in business. I'll go through. I had a mate of mine who used to say it's like the Rotordec, and you have this list of people that you're in touch with, and nowadays your Rotordec's your mobile phone, so it's all your address directories and your contact numbers. And what tends to happen to me, it's like I'm driving along and I'm bored, so I'll just ring people. And it might just be ringing them, say, hello, how you doing, what's going on? Nothing more than that. Talk about football, talk about anything you want, it doesn't matter. But you never know. Every now and again you ring them. Clearly you might have a point, or they might have a point, but if you don't talk to them, they don't talk to you. And to me, that's where the workflow, to quote, again, the online phrase, comes in, that you've got to keep just gently tapping people on the shoulder. They need to know you're still there, and that's about maintenance and then in some ways development of that relationship, that you care about them, you're interested in them, you do keep ringing them. Great.
And that, to me, does map to the online world and the less direct contact, that you talked about right at the beginning, the opportunities that the new technologies are bringing us. Because, for example, this podcast is a way that I let people know, and Pete lets people know, what the topics that we're interested in and what we're up to right now and what we're good at.
And it humanises what you're doing.
and it humanises what we're doing. Just like blogging.
Exactly.
Blogging is a great way to let people know. And if you're in a more structured business or you've got a bit more of a client base, maybe even sending out emails with an autoresponder sequence that just keep people up to date with what's going on in your business is a great way to just keep in touch with a lot of people. It's slightly more impersonal, but it just makes sure that everybody gets some idea of what's going on.
You can just come back to, if you like, a balance then of what you're going to do, because there's a lot of to me my sort of interest in the online thing comes partly based out of the idea that everything's dictating down that digital path, and you don't almost have to talk to people. Well, what I'd say is, well, yeah, to an extent you're right, but you do have to talk to people. You do have to communicate and physically keep in touch with people to make the absolute best and the optimum approach to what you're doing.
I agree. I mean, despite being heavily involved in the online world, at the end of the day, and my clients will attest to this, the first thing that happens, I get referrals. In fact, my entire business is referral based.
Which is why we're talking. Obviously, I mean, that's exactly how we came together, was because of a physical relationship that I have with somebody else that who said, "Look, go and talk to this guy," and that's so important. That people, it's developing trust.
Yeah, it's especially for the kind of services that my company offers. I've got something to sell. It's quite a specialist service. It's quite high end. And the people that I work with, I want to get on with them. I have long-term, ongoing relationships with my clients. So getting those clients through referrals is a great way for me to do that. But in order to do that, in order for people to refer the right people to me, I need to get out there to my existing client base and talk to them and let them know what kind of clients I want and what kind of services I offer. Because if people aren't aware of what you do, they can't tell anybody else. And that, to me, is one of the core things about what we're talking about here, is wherever you are, whatever you're doing, whether it's you've gone to a conference or you're at one of these networking events, whether it's a networking breakfast or a huge event, or whether you're online and just talking about things, to me, it's really core that you've got your story sorted out. Yeah?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And what that does is it develops and allows people to trust you. And the best way that people can trust you is by being in touch with you on all manner of levels. But probably the best one is when they can shake you in the hand and stare you in the eye, and all those sensory perceptions that people make their minds up on things really comes into focus, I think, when you're standing in the same room and you're physically talking with somebody, and that whole history of your life is about how you closet and put things in a box, and sometimes you get it wrong and sometimes you get it right, but like as you go through life, your ability to assess people and see if you're going to get on with people, see if they're going to become your friends, on the whole, takes place when you're physically in a room with them.
And I think you made a good point indirectly there, which is that the more you do this, the easier it gets.
You're right there, absolutely. Yeah. And some people are naturally shy, and you said yourself. I mean, you probably wouldn't believe that I'm shy, but there are occasions when I am. And I think what I'd like to get over to people by that is, look, it's not an uncommon thing, and don't be embarrassed about it, because we all get it in one form or another. And especially when you're out of your comfort zone, if you like, of people you work with on whatever level, or if you're not in an industry you understand, it becomes a little bit more difficult. But the one thing it does, if you do talk to people, if you do take that brave step and just dip your toe in the water, it gets easier every time.
Yeah, to me, I can absolutely attest to this. The first conference I went to, I don't think I really came away from it with very much at all. And then the next time, the two things that helped me was, one, looking for those people that asked the questions and seeing if I could add value. And the other one was just being ready with, again, what's referred to in other circles as an elevator pitch. It's not really an elevator pitch. It's just being able to succinctly tell people who you are and what you do. And I actually, here's a thing. I probably haven't told you this, but because of my very varied background, I know a lot about lots of different things, including print. And I came across two things that have helped me a lot. One of them is something from Pete's world. Pete talks about a service called Send Out Cards. Mm-hmm. And we talked a lot about in this call about physical contact and doing things physically. And Pete uses Send Out Cards, which is an online digital card printing service, like greetings cards, to order cards that are bespoke, that are customised to the person you're sending it to. So they're each printed individually for the people. There's other services out there that do it in different parts of the world. But Pete uses it to regularly keep in contact with people if he remembers somebody's birthday, for example.
Yeah.
So that's a way of following up because one of the points you made was follow up with people.
Yeah, I think it's hugely important, yeah.
Yeah, hugely important, and different ways of doing it, including making yourself stand out by sending a card rather than the standard email, which can be a little bit impersonal. Yeah. But on the upfront side, I had another thing that I worked out based on a similar system. There's a service out there that I use, and I'll put a link to all this in the show notes. And these people will print 100 cards for a very reasonable price, 100 business cards, and they've got a couple of distinctive shapes to them. Some of them are smaller and some of them have rounded corners. But when you have a service that can print you 100 cards for a reasonable price, you get to the point where you could actually have cards made for a particular event.
Yeah.
And I did this a couple of times. I actually had a card which had my brand information and my general kind of message on the front. But on the back, I actually wrote a little kind of witty passage on the back that was specific to the event. So I wrote something like, I went to the Manchester conference in August 2011, and I met this guy called Dom Goucher. He knows a lot about, let's say, podcasting and online marketing and digital video. I should give him a call on this number, or I should send him an email on this number. And it basically encapsulates all in one little thing, everything you want to achieve by talking to people. And it gives them that little reminder that they can take away. So rather than just having a standard business card that says John Davy, International Facilities, etc., which doesn't really, I mean, it might tell them what you do in a vague way, but it doesn't really give them all the information that you want them to have. You could very cheaply and easily get these things done that you can actually just hand out, and it's a little CV, a little resume for you.
Especially if you're at a trade show or anything like that, or a specific conference, if you can make it bespoke to that place, and they'll remember the conference and they remember you as being part of it. Sounds like a cracking idea. Yeah,
and that again worked for me, and also it's a talking point. If you feel the conversation slowing down, because you talked about that, the one thing I don't have is that rhino skin. If I start talking to somebody and the whole room goes quiet and a tumbleweed whistles past.
Yeah, never good. Never good.
Never good. I still haven't mastered the art of shuffling away quietly.
I have, you see. No, look, you can't help it. Sometimes that happens, and look, you also find on the upside of that, there's a lot of people who feel the same way as you, and the fact you actually take time to just say hello, 9 times out of 10, it's an icebreaker and it lets you develop and go. It's not all bad for sure.
But that's a good point that you made there, though, that if you're in a room full of people and you don't know anybody, just think that maybe nobody else does either. And as you said earlier, especially if you go to a conference or an event that's focused on a particular topic or niche, you do have something in common with those people.
Yeah,
it's that niche, it's that topic, it's whatever you've gone to the conference about. There's definitely got to be something you have in common because you're in the same room.
Exactly right, and they're all there to do what you're hoping to do.
Yeah. So we're getting close to time. It's been a great chat. I've picked up some good tips and some. It's a great perspective from somebody to hear that somebody who does this for a living and is very successful at it is still has the same problems that the rest of us have.
We're all human.
We're all human. Yeah. Well, last time I looked, anyway. Although that Pete, I'm not so sure about because that guy's just got energy coming out of his ears. Have you got like a top 5 tips for somebody getting started or who wants to start using networking, be a more effective networker?
Yeah,
Can
look,
you...
I think, I mean, the basic premises of, put your brave face on, stick your hand up, if you can, because you've got this opportunity and this room full of people that are doing what you're doing. If you can stick your hand up, you've got a chance you're going to go somewhere. I think the other thing, there's a number of little things like taking your time. What this is not about is getting introduced to somebody and doing the speed dating, speed networking thing of introduce and try and sell to somebody immediately. If you take time to smell the roses and really listen to people and show an interest in what they're doing, then you're going to do a little bit better than you might if you didn't. I think that's pretty important. Again, coming back to the point of following up, once you've made all that effort and you've got brave and you've spoken to somebody and you've done that first bit and got over it, well, don't forget them. Don't leave them and let them forget you. Just keep in their minds. And you don't have to be in their faces all the time, but just, drop them a line, as you say. Give them that card that you've developed for the event and just keep them in your head. And then just keep gently tapping them on the shoulder. I think the one thing I've found recently, and I think it's a massive tool for that human element of networking, is the social tools that you can get to do. The Twitters, the Facebooks, the various things, and they give you, people allow and publish so much about themselves that you would never have known about just a few years ago. And so it's just bringing all these little tools in together that can help you with these networking events, and maybe doing a little bit of advanced research before you go somewhere never hurts as well. So I think 4 or 5 things there, hopefully, that people might find a bit of use to them.
That's great, John. I love the summary. I do like, and one of the reasons that I asked you to come on the call is that you do strongly believe that it's a mutual thing. That as you say, you need to listen to people. You don't need to walk straight up to them and expect something to happen, or for you to get something from them immediately.
Look, I think that's vital, because nobody likes people buy because they want to buy from you. I mean, sorry, just let me phrase that way. So you can either sell something to somebody, or you can get them mentally to want to buy from you. And I think that latter one is the best thing to do. And how you do that is you don't actually go out and do your double glazing salesman and try and tie them into a corner and do something. You want to become their friend, and you want to become their friend who's interesting to them, partly because you've got something to offer.
Yeah, and as we can both attest, you've built an entire business on networking over your career, which is a very successful business. And my business, my media production business, is successful by and large thanks to my network of clients who have made referrals and suggested me and my services to their friends and colleagues. And I haven't actually actively gone out there and asked for the referral. I've got that referral through having done a good job and through having made it clear the services that I offer, and that people can refer their friends and colleagues to me, just like you. But
that's because you're Dom Goucher. You are Dom, who has this talent of doing things at high end for production and various things, but people know you. It's not like your ATA video services or something like that. You're a person.
And that's a really good point, actually. Yeah, that's a really good point. It is me. It's not my business that's getting the referral. It is that personal aspect of it. And that's quite important to remember. And I think that's a great place to wrap all this up, John. And I really appreciate your time. I know you're a busy guy flying all over the world. So it's not been that different having Pete on the call, really.
Well, look, and just thanks very much for inviting me on, because it's been a great pleasure. And, I hope we can do it again sometime. It'd be great.
Yeah, that's great. Now, before we go, you said that you're just getting started in the online space. Is there a way online that people can find you and find out more about you?
Funnily enough, there is. We have a website called biznetworkguy.com, which is BIZ, networkguy.com. And that's in its early infancy days, but it's going to hopefully add a bit of online content to and sort of tips and suggestions and Look, I'd like it to be, again, part of the networking thing. It's going to be great if we can persuade people to feed back into it and come up with their own ideas and their own experiences, and it's, you know, a little bit holistic, hopefully, in that approach. If you visit that site, there are a couple of other things that I'm running at the moment, which are a bit more on the tangible business front, so you can get a sense for what I'm doing in different areas, like the Middle East and the stuff there, and there's a carbon fibre technology system that we're doing some work with, and you know, you'll be able to find links to those sort of things there. But the networking hub, the real bit of what my ethos and life is about, is Biz Network Guy. That's
great, and hopefully people will pop over. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. People will pop over and visit it. But you're more than welcome. Thank you very much for your time, John. And hopefully you'll tap me on the shoulder and later on in the year and let me know how you're getting on.
I won't be worrying about that too much. Cheers.
Cheers, John.
Thank you.
Okay, folks. So that was John Davy, Biz Network Guy at biznetworkguy.com. Really appreciate John popping on, and as I said, it was interesting for me to get a little personal side to things, a little bit more direct, hands-on, because in business you do come across people that you meet wherever they are. And my one tip to add to something that John said is be on the lookout. Have it in your mind. Be on the lookout for people that might be interesting or useful additions to your network of people. You should always be open to people. You should always have a chat with people that you meet and be friendly. And it's not about, what can they do for me, which is kind of the wrong attitude, as John said. It's just about getting yourself known. But my summary of that is, as John says, put your hand up, get yourself out there. So before we close, I'll just talk about our last, our second sponsor, not our last sponsor, Audible Books, a fantastic service for listening to content, which is a great way to consume it. And like with Read It For Me, we've got a deal for you, a free trial. If you go to audibletrial.com/PreneurCast, you can get access to a free trial and a free download of any one of the books from their library of over 100,000 titles that you can download and listen to on your portable audio playing device. So I do recommend you do that. A little bit of a bonus for being a PreneurCast listener there. I'm going to wrap it up as we get to time. Thanks, everybody, for listening just to me and to John. And thanks for coming, John. Next week, we'll see how Pete recovers from his honeymoon. It could be another grab-a-bag surprise episode. If you've got any ideas, just in the same way that John dropped us a line and let us know what he's about, drop us a line at PreneurCast@PreneurGroup.com. And let us know if there's something you want to hear more about, if there's somebody you would like us to try and get as an interview, or if you think that you would like to be interviewed on the show, if you've got something interesting to add to the audience, because this is an audience-driven show. We love your feedback on the site over at preneurmedia.tv and on the iTunes. We love to get reviews there. So that's it from me on my own. And, see you next week.
You've been enjoying another fine episode of PreneurCast with Pete Williams and Dom Gosher. Make sure to hang out with the boys online at PreneurMedia.tv or drop them a line via PreneurCast@PreneurGroup.com.